This video will show the remaining examples of how to create graphs in Excel. So if you haven't already watched or created the pie chart from example 1, go ahead and watch the previous video. This video will just look at examples 2, 3, and 4. So now that we've got the basics down, we can go ahead and look at these other examples. So example 2 talks about food orders for 20 people visiting a restaurant. And so we can see this is not really organized, right? They probably just wrote down the orders. And we want to determine the popularity of items on the restaurant's menu. So I first want to look at how many of these we have. So there was 20 people visiting the restaurant, but we can see there's 30 items in column A. So what that means is, of those 20 people, they probably ordered multiple things, right? So someone came in and they ordered not just a burger, they could have ordered a burgers or fries and some other menu item. So in terms of determining which graph would be best for showing the popularity, a pie chart would definitely not work. We have menu items that are going to be overlapping the various categories or being counted multiple times in various categories. So we cannot do a circle graph or pie chart. A line graph would also not be appropriate because our categories don't really show trends well. So usually you want to see trends on a line graph when there's like something involving time, right? How is it changing, increasing, or decreasing over time? Here we just have the different categories. So in our instance, a bar graph is going to be the way to go, and we can determine the popularity based off of how many menu items were ordered for each category. So we can kind of see the height of our bars to indicate the popular items. So part A, I'm going to explain that, why I selected a bar graph. Okay, so there I've put my explanation why a bar graph would be the most appropriate graph for our situation. Let me make sure I spell things correctly. Restaurant. Okay. Now we're going to fill in our frequency table. So this time you guys can see there's not the relative frequency listed because we don't need to find the percentage. We just want to know the quantity to represent the height of our bars. However, that's going to be difficult to count all these in their current state, which is all jumbled and mixed up. So like our previous example, I'm going to select column A. In the home menu, I'm going to go ahead and select filter and sort. Now this time my filter and sort is listed A to Z and Z to A because Excel realizes that we don't have numbers in column A. We have written words, right? So we can sort it, say A to Z. That'll put all my burger orders, fry orders, juice orders, and so on all together. So again, using my rows, I can figure out the quantity. So I can see that there was 10 burgers ordered. So I will enter that in my table. Then for fries, we can actually count. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fries orders. For juice, so juice, we can see it starts at 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 juice orders. Pizza, let's see how many pizzas there are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pizza orders. And then our salad, there was 3 salad orders. Something that you can do to quickly check to make sure that all these are done correctly is you can add up all your categories and make sure that it adds up to the same total quantity that you had before. So 6 plus 10 plus 5 plus 3 plus 6 is 30. So that's just a quick check to make sure that I didn't miscount anything. So now that my table is filled in, I'm going to go ahead and select my categories and the frequency. Oops. So just clicking on one cell and dragging to select the rest. I'm going to go to the insert menu again. And this time we want a bar chart. So there's a couple different bar chart options, so you may want to explore that. That's more a histogram. That's not what we need this time. We want a bar chart. So again, you can kind of preview your different styles and make sure that's appropriate. So Excel sometimes will not pick the appropriate one for you. So if we want a traditional bar graph, there it is. And again, we can select the white click on the white section of the graph, and that allows you to kind of drag it around. Okay, so here, I mean, most of my graph looks pretty good. I mean, I have my categories on the bottom. We can see the frequency on the side. We do typically want to add labels to those axes so that if someone's looking at this graph, they know that these menu items are food orders and that the numbers they see on the side are frequency values. So you can go to that, when you have your graph selected, click the Add Graph Chart element. Under Axis Titles, we can go ahead and add the titles that we want included. So I personally like including both axis labels. I think it creates a far more clear graph. So once you have the axis title put on there, you can go ahead and edit it. So this was menu items. And then click on the one going the other way. Oops. If you ever do anything you don't like, you can always hit undo. So here, oops, I somehow missed my label. Let's see if I just hit undo again. I got it back. So doing the one sideways, I've always had difficulty with, so just be kind of careful when you're working with that one. This is the frequency or number of orders. And then we want a meaningful title. So we can say food items ordered at a restaurant. And there is our bar chart. So here we can pretty clearly read the bars. If you had a bar chart where it was kind of tough to read the exact item numbers or the height of each of your bars, that's something that you could also add. So under the chart elements, under data labels, if you wanted to include those, right, you could. So sometimes if your bar graph is not the easiest to read, you can include those labels as to how many menu items were included. So you could choose to include that on your graph or not. Moving on to example 3, I'll get rid of that menu on the side there. We're looking at the income of faculty at a small college, and we want to make a graph that shows the trends in the income paid to faculty. So here we can see in column A there's a pretty wide range of different numbers, and we kind of have a sense too on our table what sort of graph would make sense. So because there's such a large range of potential incomes, they're breaking it into different intervals. So if a person made between $0 and $10,000, how many people made that amount? From $10,001 to $20,000, how much was made, and so on. And so when you have your values, your data values broken into intervals just to make them easier to count, that's an indicator you're going to use a histogram, because histograms do just that. They take a whole range of values and then break them into intervals that we can more easily count. So in this case, we're going to use the numerical value for a bar graph, which is our histogram. Okay, so part A, I included some explanation why I picked a bar graph, which is the same thing as a histogram for our salaries. And now I need to count up my frequencies. So again, my data is not sorted. That makes it very difficult to count. So the first thing I'm going to do is select column A in my home menu, go to my sort and filter, and we'll do smallest to largest here. So I'm going to go through and look at my data values and fill in each of these frequency values. So I'm going to look for incomes between 0 and 10,000 and see how many are falling in that range. And so 10,000, so the cutoff would be right here. The last one is 9,600. So looking at my row values, there's 19. Now from 10,000 to 20,000. So that ended on row 19. 20,000, we can see here at 22. Row 22 was when it went over 20,000. So that's only 2 entries there. From 20 to 30, there was only that one, right? The 27,250 that we see here. So that's 1. Between 30 and 40, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we are going to include the 40,000. So there's 6 there. And then 40 to 50. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then 50 to 60. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 for that category. And then 60 to 70. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right there. And 70 to 80. So 1, 2, 3. And anything above 80,000 is our last category. So scrolling down, there's 2 salaries. All right, and just like the last one, I'm going to quickly add these up to make sure that they total to the same amount of data items that I'm expecting. And I got 60 of them. And if we look at our rows, scroll the way down, we do in fact have the 60 that we were expecting. So now we can go ahead and create our histogram. So we're going to select all of our categories and the frequency. We're going to go to the Insert tab and look for the graph. There's several that look like bar charts. Look for the one that says histogram. Now when you preview it, it does not quite look like what we want it to. There's only 2 bars there, but that we can fix. That's not a problem. So go ahead and move your histogram, your bar chart, to a good part on your spreadsheet. And then where you see these little data labels, go ahead and double click on it. That will open up our editing menu. So we can see right now those only have 2 bars instead of all the different categories we need, because it automatically selected the categories for us, which is what we don't want. So if you put the selection on by category, now that's what we wanted to see. That is each of our bars separated by the categories that we stated. And we can also include more information on our graph from here. So now that I have the categories broken up, I want to add my axis labels. So I'm going to go to the Add Chart element, axis titles. I'm going to go ahead and select primary horizontal, primary vertical. We can include those. If I wanted to include the height of my bars, that's under data labels. So in this instance, it may be a little tricky to read our bar graph, so I'm going to go ahead and include the data labels. And you can choose where you want them to be, right? They can be inside the bars, at the top, at the bottom, or kind of on the outside near the top. So now that I've gotten all those selected, I'm going to type in my axes labels and then the label for my graph. So this is the salary. Oops. All right. If you ever do anything you don't like, just remember to hit undo. All right, and this is the frequency. And this is faculty, salaries, oops, at a small college. Okay, so now let's look at our final example, problem 4, which is yearly pay. So here we can see it's organized a little bit differently for our data. We have several columns. So columns A through D, I'll scroll to the left here to see all of them. That's the monthly paycheck amount for Tom's part-time job over a 4-year period. and we want to make a graph to show how Tom's yearly salary compared each year. So this time we have values in terms of time. I can look at his salary in 2013, 2014, 15, and 16. And so when your categories are with respect to time, that's an indicator that a line graph might be the way to go. In particular, if we want to be able to know what's happening from year to year. Is there an increase or a decrease? Things of that nature. So a line graph would be our selection this time. So now that we've made a graph selection, we can move on to filling in our table. So this time our table is set up a little bit differently. I don't have a frequency for each of my categories. Now we're going to talk about total pay. And that's just because the nature of our data is a little bit different, that we have all of his paychecks within a year, and we want to summarize that more efficiently than looking at each and every data value. So we want to actually kind of figure out what all of his paychecks added up all together would be. So I'm going to select the cell for the total pay for each year here, and we're going to tell Excel to add up these numbers for us. So I'm going to use a formula. So I'm going to type equals, and the formula we're going to use is called the sum formula. It just means it's going to add up all the numbers that are kind of grouped together in the spreadsheet. Either they're all in the same row, like they are all in the same row, or all in the same column, like they are here. So you type in SUM, and you can see Excel is pretty smart. When you're typing in a formula, it's going to try and anticipate which one you want to use. So if you're ever not sure which formula you actually need, just kind of start typing in the name of whatever it is you want to do, and it'll have suggestions for what you want to do. So I want to do the sum. You can see that there's a lot of sum options. If you're not sure if it's the right one, it'll preview what it's going to do. So it adds up all the numbers in a range of cells. Is what we want. If you weren't sure if it was one of the other ones, you could read the descriptions and figure out if that's the one you want. So we want the sum. We're going to do an open set of parentheses, and that's because we have a list of numbers we want to add up. So I'm going to open my parentheses, and then I'm going to select. So I'm going to select my cell, and then just drag down and select all the cells we want added. So here, that's going to be this whole list of cells, starting at cell A2, ending at cell A13. And Excel, as you can see here, it actually highlights them in a nice color, so you can see exactly what cells it's going to add up for you. And I'm going to close my parentheses. That's important. If you leave that off, then Excel won't calculate it. It'll give you a warning message. So you do have to put the open and close parentheses, and then hit enter. And we can see it did the calculation for us, and this is the new number that we got out of it. Typically when there is a formula that's been calculated, you'll see like a little icon in your box, like the little triangle we have here. It's just so that we can know that that number came from some calculation. And so I want to do that then for the next column, so equals sum. I'm going to select the values for 2014 and do it for the next one. And because this is a repeated calculation, we could also use that copy down feature that we saw previously for Excel. Okay, so now we can go ahead and create our line graph. So I'm going to select the cells I want included in my graph for the year and total pay. I'm going to select on the insert menu the line graph. And when we start previewing this, we can see we aren't really getting the graphs that we want. There's too many lines on them. I can go to more line charts, and that's where it's going to allow me to get the one I want. So this one has 2 lines on it because it's thinking that I need 1 line for the total pay and 1 line for the year. That's not what we want here. We want this one where the years are one of my axes and then the total pay is the other. So sometimes the menu you want is not the one that automatically pops up. So you might have to go to the more chart options to find it. So once I've inserted that, I'm going to go ahead and drag it so it doesn't cover up sections of my spreadsheet that I don't want covered. And we do want to include our axes labels here, so I'm going to add the chart element. I'm going to add the horizontal and the vertical axis titles. I do have my trend line but sometimes, you know, it may be hard to really know the value of where these points are. So if you wanted to include that, you go to the data labels option, and that's where you can pick where you want them to be located, because sometimes locating it in a certain place makes it hard to read. So you can pick wherever you want those data labels to go. So that kind of gives me the nice visual of the line graph, but then it also lets me know exactly where the points are, which is pretty nice. So let's label our axes now. So this is our year. And this one is yearly pay. Or we should say just as pay. So this is yearly pay from part-time job. All right, so that's how you can create all the different sort of graphs in Excel.